Sometimes I look at tag questions and think up my answers and just worry that I'm a very boring person, but I'm gonna have faith in myself and assume that all of you lovely, wonderful people wouldn't be subscribed to me if you thought I was boring, and do the tag anyways. Hi everyone, Rosie here. Welcome back to my channel. I was tagged by the lovely Carrie of Very Literary Carrie in the last 10 books tag, or last 10 tag. I'm not sure. I'll double check before I put a title on this. So as I said, I was tagged by Carrie. The original tag is by Mark Nash. Her video and also the original video will both be linked down below and you should check those out. I have no idea what to say to transition from that into the questions, so let's just start. Question 1 is the last book you didn't finish. That is the Sawbones book, The Hilarious Horrifying Road to Modern Medicine by Justin and Sydney McElroy. I was listening to the audiobook of this back at the end of November and ended up DNFing it. It just wasn't very interesting, honestly. I mean, that topic sounds fascinating, right? How could you write a boring book about the gruesome, gory history of medicine? But this one just wasn't introducing any information that I didn't already know. On top of that, I didn't really enjoy the narration style, especially in the audiobook. It just felt very disjointed and not actually like a whole book, but like a series of tweets. So there was no exciting or dramatic reason that I DNF'd this book. I just realized that I was avoiding going for walks on my lunch breaks because I didn't want to listen to this book. So I figured I'd better start an audiobook that I actually wanted to listen to so that I wouldn't become a little golem who never leaves my cave of an apartment. Question 2, the last book you reread. When I'm filming this, I'm actually actively rereading Le Parfum by Patrick Suskind. This is set in 1700s in France and centers on Grenouille, who is a very, very strange man who has the most remarkable nose in the world and yet doesn't emit an odor himself, which makes him very creepy and very strange to the people around him. Anyways, this unique combination leads him to some interesting places in his life. This is a very gross, graphic book in many ways, but it's really interesting and I'm very much enjoying rereading it. Also, despite being quite literary in style, I'm finding it much easier to read than the last French novel I read, so that's a big plus. Question 3, the last book you bought. A week or so ago now, I picked up the ebook of Amatka. Is that how it says? Yes, Amatka by Karin Tidbeck, who is a Swedish author. This is a very unusual buy for me because it's science fiction that either borders on dystopian or just flat out is dystopian, and as you guys know, dystopian is like the one thing that I absolutely hate. This seems to take place in a world where there's maybe a capital city and then these remote colonies. I'm not too sure how it works, but apparently if things are not routinely and properly named, reality starts to disintegrate, and I think there's some sort of conspiracy that's being covered up by an administration. It sounds really interesting, and also it's short, so I figure even if it's dystopian, at least it's short dystopian, so maybe I'll be okay with it and it won't leave me feeling anxious for ages. We'll see. Question 4. The last book you said you read but didn't. I feel like such a nerd saying this. I mean, we're all nerds on BookTube, right? But I don't think I've ever done this. I was the kid in school who read all of the assigned reading, at least for like books. I never read textbooks in university. I bought them and then I never opened them, at least after first year. But in terms of like actual books that were assigned for reading in high school or the few that I read in university, I read all of them. I didn't always enjoy them, but I always read them. Obviously, there are loads of books in the world that I have not read, but I don't think I've ever pretended to have read one that I hadn't. Question 5, the last book you wrote in the margins of. I've never really been a margin writer. Honestly, I haven't read that many books for school since high school. What I used to do when I was reading books for like literature classes in high school was I'd keep a notebook with pages that could be torn out, keep all of my notes on that, and then at the end of a chapter, I'd tear the pages about that chapter out and like slot them into the book at the beginning of the chapter, if that makes sense. So each chapter would have a couple pages of notes. I just found it worked better that way when I was writing an essay, because then I could pull them all out. I usually have like page references, but all of my notes were in one place. I didn't have to flip through a lot. And honestly, the closest thing I can think of to writing in the margins that I've done at all recently is Quesadillas by Juan Pablo Villalobos, which it shows that it has been a long time since I tried to speak any Spanish. I read this for a class in university, and I don't know if you can see, I'm on manual focus, so I probably won't adjust, but I did like tab it up with little colored sticky tab things because I was writing an essay on this one and I used, a color code with my tabs. Quesadillas feature prominently in this book, as you can guess from the title, and I think blue tabs was quesadillas, which was actually like a point in my essay. I'm terrible at holding books up, by the way, because I just move too much and then my editing is a nightmare. I also do use the note function on my Kindle occasionally, but it doesn't feel like the same thing because that's just a random digital thing somewhere in the cloud? Is it in the cloud? I don't know. It's not like an actual marking. And even then, most of my reading notes now are on my phone, again, so that they're all in one place and I don't have to flip through to find them at all. Question 6, the last book you had signed. I don't think I've ever had a book signed, because to me, the way that question is asked makes it sound like I went to an author signing, I brought my book, or I bought my book there and I went and talked to the author and they signed it for me. However, I do have a few signed books, and the most recent one that I acquired is a signed first edition of It Devours by Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Cranor. I don't remember if my copy of the first novel is signed or not, but when this one came out, I did get it, and see if I can flip it open. I can't get it open to the, it does have like the signature, but I just bought this at my local bookstore. I didn't go to a signing or anything. Honestly, most of my life, including to an extent now, I've lived in areas that were off the beaten path enough that author signings weren't really a thing. And obviously now I can't sort of try and get into that scene in the city where I live now because pandemic. I was just starting to try and explore that side of where we live and get more involved with that sort of thing when it started, so that's sort of been put on hold. I'm not opposed to the idea, it's just never been a thing I did. Question 7, the last book you lost. I don't think I've ever lost a book. I mean, I'm sure I have. I'm sure as a child I lost books or misplaced books or something, but I can't remember a single instance of being like, oh no, I can't find my copy of this. Question 8, the last book you had to replace. I don't know if I've ever had to replace a book because it sort of got ruined, like it got dropped in the bath or it got left out on the floor and someone walked on it or anything like that. But I did have to recently replace Le Parfum by Patrick Süskind. Essentially what happened is when I read it in high school, I had a physical copy because I was reading it for class and I didn't use an e-reader at the time and all that sort of thing. So I had a physical copy of the book and I held on to it for years. So I finished high school in 2012, and in either the summer of 2017 or Christmas of 2018, I got rid of my physical copy. In 2017, I packed up all my books from my bedroom at my parents' house and put them in a closet. And then in Christmas of 2018, I then took all the books out of the closet, boxed them up, and shipped them to where I live now. And at both points, I went through and got rid of books that I didn't want to keep. Because until that point, I had kept basically every book that I had ever read as an adult, and even a lot that I'd read as a child. And I realized that I didn't need to cram all of those into a one-bedroom apartment. So I went through and I really culled it down to the ones I wanted to keep. At those points in time, and I'm not sure when I got rid of this one, I realized that all of the French books that I had read in high school were probably not ones I needed to hang on to. So I donated all of them. And at the time, that was absolutely the right decision. I didn't need to hang on to books from 5+ years ago that I had absolutely no intention of rereading and had no emotional attachment to. That's a waste of a bookshelf, in my view. Then, of course, I decided that, hey, that would be kind of interesting to reread. I'd like to give that another go, but I no longer have my copy. Also, I prefer to read ebooks now if I can, so I very recently bought the ebook version of Le Parfum and replaced that one. Question 9, the last book you had an argument over. I feel like I'm really boring in this tag because, again, I don't know. I don't remember ever having a vehement argument about a book. I probably had some arguments about something related to economics in either undergrad or grad school. I don't remember any specific examples or any specific books. And question 10, the last book you couldn't get a hold of. This isn't one that I strictly couldn't get a hold of. I could get it if I wanted to, but for reasons I will explain, I haven't. And that is The Women Who Forgot to Invent Facebook and Other Stories by Nisha Susan. Amrita mentioned this on her channel a while ago. It sounds incredible. It sounds like a short story collection. You guys know I love those. And I went to pick it up, but there's no ebook available, so I couldn't get it that way, which would be my preferred way of buying a book. There's only a physical book. However, I can't buy the physical book through my local bookstore. And I have a rule with myself, because I do still use a Kindle and I do still buy ebooks from Amazon, that I only buy physical books either through my local bookstore or through another local bookstore online. I don't buy physical books from Amazon. I figure that's at least one way I can try and support local, even if that's not where the majority of my money is going, unfortunately. Maybe I'll make a whole video about that at some point, but I feel like that could be a whole can of snakes that I don't want to get into, so we'll see. Anyways, the only way to get this book in Canada, where I am, is on Amazon, and it's like $60, which I'm sure it's an amazing book, and I would love to support this author, and I would love to read this book, but I'm just not willing to pay $60 for a hardcover book, which I would rather have an ebook anyways, and through Amazon. So for now, I can't get a hold of that one. If that situation changes, I would absolutely like to buy this book, but for now, unfortunately, it's out of reach. All right, that's the end of the questions. It's time to tag some people. I'm going to tag Emrita of Emrita by the Book because I don't think she has done this tag and I haven't seen her get tagged in it yet. We'll see. If you have done it, I'm sorry. You probably filmed it already by the time this comes out. I'm also going to tag Jeremy Fee because he always has interesting answers to tags. Then I'm going to tag some booktubers who I'm just starting to get to know their channels and I'm really excited to see more from. So I'm going to tag Anjanette of The Book Bar, Lisa of Troy, and Debbie of Lollyblogger. All of their channels will be linked down below. You should absolutely check them out because they are great. Oh, and of course, as always, if you'd like to do this video and I didn't tag you, please consider yourself tagged. It's always an open tag to anyone on this channel. I guess that brings us to the end of this video. If you have any fun anecdotes or want to answer the tag down below in the comments, please do. Let's chat about this stuff. As always, if you like this video, please hit the like button down below. If you'd like to see more of my videos, please hit subscribe, and thank you for watching.